Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about the issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is singer-songwriter Linda McLean, and she's also a friend of mine. And this interview is coming from my kitchen. And we've had such trouble. We've had to get the water and the microphones and a pin to keep the microphone in place. My goodness me, the trials and tribulations of doing a podcast interview in your kitchen. So anyway, welcome, Linda.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
I'm so pleased that you're here, and I'm so pleased we're able to do this. We're going to try not to laugh too much, honestly.
I'm trying so hard to not laugh right now.
We got the giggles a while ago as well. So.
It's a lovely kitchen. It's very comfortable.
It is, and I hope that the soundproofing will be reasonable as well, because the builders are doing stuff outside.
Yeah.
But
anyway, a beautiful day.
You are hot off your debut showcase yesterday in London, and for the first time you performed some of your writings from your book as well as your writings from your songs. So first of all, tell me, what was that like?
The preparation for it was a bit of a mystery. I had no idea how it was going to go. I had the vision that it was going to work really well, and then when I started working through it, I had all those doubts that you have when you're trying to create something new. And I wanted to see a positive outcome, but every now and then I would think, oh, this is just awful. This sucks. This is never going to work. So the preparation was up and down like that. And then when the time came to actually do it in front of everyone, I felt elated. I felt so grateful. I felt really excited and happy and grounded and like this was such a good opportunity. And I'd had a friend email me earlier in the day and say, she's a friend in Canada, say just enjoy every moment. And I really took that to heart and took a deep breath and held my ground, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I felt the resonance because it was an intimate venue. So to explain, it was really just a small little chapel that's on top of the London Irish Centre here in London. And I'd found it just by accident, really, but it seemed perfect when I'd seen it. And I'd imagined people sitting quite close and really getting a feel for the shift from the reading from the book into the song and then back and forth. And then I would feel how people were feeling. And then afterwards, because I just invited people for this experimental showcase, I would get feedback and generous feedback to really find out if it was something that worked. So I was excited to find out how it would all go. And then immediately at the end, I realized I loved doing that. It felt like I'd found my way to this place, that my life has really led to this now, where I can combine the writing and the music. And I'm just so excited to carry it on and do more of them.
I think it's amazing, actually, because you've been writing songs for a long time now, writing and performing your own work. So you're a poet, but now you've written several books. I know that you haven't published, haven't you? They're skulking around there. We need to get them published. But this one, hopefully, it's going to be published soon.
Yes.
And it's a very personal story, and you're being you've always been vulnerable, I guess, in your songs, but you're being even more vulnerable with this book, aren't you? Tell us about the book.
The title that I've been working with is The Importance of Being Important. And the initial impetus to write the book came from a realization that I had that even as a successful, in quotation marks, songwriter and living a very happy and fulfilled and rich life, I still felt this self-doubt. I still felt that I didn't have a right to do, that I needed permission from the world to carry on and do I was passionate about. And I didn't even realize that I had that self-doubt. I thought I was so enlightened that I was past it. My mind was always telling me that I was past it. And I had this realization that I hadn't been the most important person in my life. And it was just through someone saying that, making that statement, and me being so uncomfortable hearing those words that I had to figure out why. And that figuring made me go back into my life yet again, which I had done many times with the songs, but even more deeply and a little more forensically, I suppose, more details of why it was that I could be this person outwardly so shiny who inwardly just didn't feel that she belonged anywhere. So exploring that became the book. Initially, it was going to be a story for my children because I thought, and my grandchildren, I thought, if this is a legacy, if this is ancestral, I really want it to stop now. I want my kids to know that I have this issue. When they were born, I had that issue. And if they have any remnant of that, I want them to be done with it because they don't need to know, they don't ever need to think that they're not relevant in their own life the way that I had. And a few drafts in, I'd let a couple of people read, a couple of editing friends of mine, writer friends, one publisher, one editor, and they'd really encouraged me to keep going. And so I went through a lot of drafts and carried on through, and a lot of the stories morphed, so the stories that I'd been hiding started coming out more, and the ones that I was having trouble with sharing freely became plainer, more plain spoken, and easier for me to grasp. So as I was going through the writing of the story, I was cathartically cleansing, I guess, or letting go and realizing things. So it's been this process. So yes, it is very deeply personal, very resonant to me. And now as I've let people read, as I've gone through drafts, it's resonating with them more. And then, just to tie this up with the actual showcase, what's happened in the last few months is that the music has come back. And I thought I was pretty much done with the music. I've written all the songs that I need to write. Now I'm writing books. As you say, I have several that are hidden away and never ready to publish. I wanted to get this one out first. For some reason, I thought this one has to be out and then those others can, be freed. And the music has come, and it's really helped shape this book now into a piece that I feel ready to bring into the world in a really profound way. Because the songs are so much a part of the story. And they were like little messengers. They were sitting out there saying, look, Linda, here is reality. Here is love. Here is peace. And when you're singing, this is, this is how it feels. And they were trying to tell me all along to be important, to be in my body, and to live my life from the center and take responsibility for my life. So they're coming out in this book, and the showcase last night. Yes, it was the first time I'd ever tried to put that into the world, and I'm so excited because, we'll see how it goes. And
well, I know, I certainly had tears in my eyes last night at one point, and I know you've talked to me about how there was a younger woman in the audience who was quite emotionally upset, wasn't she? Or not upset, but she was moved.
Really moved.
What was that all about?
Well, I heard secondhand. I didn't actually speak to her because I guess she was too scared to come up to talk to me, but apparently she'll email me or get in touch with me. She is a young woman. She's in her 20s, and she's a lawyer, and she's a real professional, and felt when she was listening to me and talking about creativity and showing up for yourself and what you really are in your life, who you want to be, it moved her to tears, and she's maybe wanting to have some help to understand how she could integrate more of her passion and her her desire to fulfill herself rather than serving the needs of other ideas or ideals. I don't know why she became a lawyer. I'd never met her, and she really was. Lots of times, people in audiences are shy to come up to the person on the stage. I understand that. I'm sometimes besotted by something, and I just can't speak to the person as much as you're moved by it. So, yeah. But it was nice to hear from someone who knew her, who she told that had been her experience, because it does tell me that this story can resonate for young people as well as people our age, or yours and mine, and more in middle age. And so that's such an important part that I hadn't been thinking about, but I love that this can help people become really, really important in their own life and take stock of what is it that I'm doing that is for me here. And I don't want to be a coach or anything. I just want to tell my story and hold the space for people and absolutely talk about it. But it's so simple, really. To me, it's just the simple flip of a mindset. What happened to me was that I just accepted that, I am the most important person in my life. And that's not an ideal. That's not an aspiration, Linda. It's just a fact. Because who are you if you're not? If you're not in the center of your own, if you're not really breathing this life and being in your own life, whose life are you in? Well, I struggled with that because I thought to be a good person, I shouldn't put myself first. So to be the most important was like, that's mean, that's selfish, that's hedonistic, that's evil. That cultural upbringing that tells us that we're supposed to live our lives serving the greater good. That was my idea of being good. I can't think of another word.
But that's what we're taught, isn't it? And I think it's particularly women. I mean, our lives revolve around looking after others so much of the time. And I'm always saying that we get to midlife and everything shifts and our anchors change. What might have kept us in a position for some time, sort of it moves, it shifts, and then what are we supposed to do? And I think that what is also so interesting about what happened last night was that I think we all underestimate how important our stories are to share, but B, the potential scope of impact of those stories, because there you have a young woman, you were not expecting that, were you? And yet, you thought, you definitely, it would make sense to a woman like me, and it absolutely does. And I'm going to ask Linda to read a little bit from the book in a moment, which will really explain what it is I'm talking about. But I think it was so powerful that here was, somebody from a completely different era, generation, could still pick out something so deep for her personally.
Yeah. And afterwards, I didn't tell you this one, but after the evening, I was hanging out at the bar with some people, and there were various ages there. And one young woman, around 26, whom I know, I've had dinner with her a few times. She's a friend of my daughter's who lives here in London. She thought about her mother when she was listening to what I was reading, and thought, my mother needs to hear this. She's 60 and all her daughters now are of an age where they're leaving her, and she's said multiple times, now what am I going to do with myself? And her youngest daughter is still at home, and there's a kind of a toxic relationship happening there because the mother is so afraid to let go of the daughter and what is she going to do then? So she was thinking that, and then she thought, but this would be a great evening to have all my sisters and my mother come to. And then we go, wow, that gave us something to think about. Let's go to a restaurant, drink a bottle of wine, and talk about what are we really doing. And that really excited me as well, that a conversation amongst generations could happen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've got goosebumps.
Yeah. Yes.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Let's do that. Mother and daughter events. It was so powerful. I absolutely loved it yesterday. So perhaps you'd like to read a little section from the book. Yeah.
Pleasure. All right. So this I call the second movement, Little Girl Lost. The frequency of music exists in the realm of emotions. This was the explanation my music teacher gave to encourage me to take his ear training lessons seriously. I'd already lost my faith in love by this time and discovered that I didn't know the difference between thinking and feeling and was numb from the neck down. But ear training vibrated through my body, and I'd grasped finally the result of ignoring my feelings one day while I was stirring soup and my babies played on the floor at my feet. They, the blameless victims of me recreating the bad marriage I'd witnessed in my parents, who'd held on to their misery out of spite, each with the hope that they would live to see the other drown. So ancestral, this antimony, so deeply carved I hadn't seen the pattern until my inner ear opened and tapped into the deep despair, and I could sense how dark the space and how unforgiving. So I broke the chain, separated my family into two parts, and on those weekends when my kids were with their dad, I'd walk through the hours of bereavement and pick up toys, or stare out a window, or soak in the emptiness, imagine the sudden peace and quiet was freedom and time for me to work on my new practice of seeing the positive side. Then I'd go to bed and stay there, and sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, surprised I hadn't disappeared, and turn onto my back and feel my face and wonder if I looked the same as last time that I stared into the bathroom mirror. And when the pressure on my chest made it impossible to breathe, I'd get up and pace and tell myself I was getting what I deserved, circle the house once, twice, and then finally settle down at the piano and move my fingers over the keys and wonder if my children were sleeping comfortably, and look at the clock and count the seconds and try to remember how I got here. I'd pick a melody and hum along until the notes would land on the unbearable ache and crack it into the history of the whole universe being swallowed in lethargy, and overcome, never able to take another step or think another thought, I'd get back into bed and curl up into a ball, pull the blankets over my head, and go to sleep. Just for a while, I'd tell myself, sleep now, and later, next time, maybe. Some Saturdays I'd have a whole night in front of me and spend it by candlelight and drink wine, smoke cigarettes, write in my journal, and let the anger rise up and sometimes follow the urge to scream and break dishes. And as the hour of my children's return approached, I'd flip a switch to efficiency mode, zoom into action, pick up all the broken pieces, wash off all the signs of sadness, vacuum the corners of shame, and sweep self-hatred under the rugs. I'd wash my hair, change my clothes, and turn my frown upside down. One cold winter night, I filled a bath and lit some candles, sank into the warm water and sighed, closed my eyes and began to breathe deeply, then slipped my head down under and remained submerged for as long as I could until my lungs were going to burst, and I imagined being close to the edge of death and asked, if you knew you were going to die, what would you want to do? And I watched the surface of the tub water as it bent in the light, and I imagined never getting up. What would you do, Linda, if you had one more chance to live your life? And I sprang up out of the water and I shouted, sing! I'd sing! The truth of it resonated through my body. I felt elated and sat up tall and threw my head back and stared at the ceiling and said, I want to sing. And then again, I want to sing. If I cried like a baby, would someone come and take care of me, give me what I wanted? because I had no idea how to proceed. Unless it was what I was reading in my spiritual books, that the only way forward was forgiveness. I hated it, the idea that to move on I would have to forgive myself for breaking up my little family. And I was afraid, and there was all the laundry to wash and hang and fold, and the pictures to frame and hang and straighten, and the dishes to put away. Then maybe forgiveness and I could find our way to one another.
Wow.
Yeah?
Wow. I get goosebumps again just listening to that. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's so from the heart and so passionate. I love it, love it, love it. Can't wait to read the book. I must get it published so I can read it.
Thank you.
But it's that idea, isn't it, that we leave things, what we really want to do isn't what we do. Mm-hmm. And that question, what would you do if you were going to die tomorrow? Mm-hmm. You know, what would you do?
It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
It's a good one. Everyone should ask themselves that right now. You don't have to... Well, you can go underwater. Actually, warm bath underwater is a really good idea. It worked. Of course, I didn't sing for many years. My first thought after I said I want to sing was, no way am I ever going to sing. I knew it so clearly.
Because you didn't actually start singing properly until you were 40, did you?
Not for another 10 years. After that experience in the tub, it was another 10 years before I got up the courage to actually say the words, I want to write songs, and start writing them, and performed the first song publicly, just in a little group of friends.
So apart from what you've written there, what would you tell your 30-year-old self?
Oh, screw the courage, girl. Just grit your teeth and do it. It's never going to go away. There's another scene in my book where I do try to tell myself, that's it. You're never going to get to do this, Linda. And I won't go into the details of it, but it's never going to go away, ladies. So whatever age you are, like we're talking about age because this is a magnificent midlife. So I'm aware of that, and part of me believes that age is kind of we've thwarted the idea of age. It's this accumulation of numbers, as you've always said. I've been listening to your podcast, and there's this recurring idea that that number, you can make that whatever you want it to be. And time is an illusion. Time is really, we are just in this moment. So right now is, if you've never given yourself permission to do that thing, you know what it is. Don't tell me you don't. That's not true. You know what it is. Do a little digging. Do a little journaling. Do a little writing. You know what it is. And it doesn't have to be singing and songwriting. It doesn't have to be art. It could be something, just whatever it is that you know. It could be digging in the garden, and digging in the garden might become this other thing. Like that simple act of digging in the garden, it could become that you are now planting these seeds to feed yourself, or it could be that it's your time to ruminate and come up with that other idea that you've been sat on. And so just go and do it. Just be there. Just follow your instinct of love, of self-love, and not just as an idea. I don't know if we want to get into that, but that was a big thing for me. So when at this scene that I've written or just read to you, it was in my mid-20s, just towards the end of my first marriage. And I had started reading these books that made me realize that I was numb. And I wanted to fix myself. So I used these spiritual books, and I learned, and I became really, really good at practicing these things, seeing the positive side and self-remembering, and how do you think, what are you thinking about, what are you feeling, what are you doing, and really becoming this objective observer of my life. I was really, really good at that. And for 30 years, through the songwriting, through all the other things that I was doing, my thought was, one of these days I'm going to be enlightened. One of these days I'm going to be enlightened. And I really believed that. One day the sky is going to fall, crack open, and the answer is going to be clear. It's right here. It's right in me. It's right in you. It's nowhere else. And that really pisses people off sometimes. I don't want responsibility. If I took responsibility for my life, then I'd have to take responsibility for my life. Who wants to do that? You know? So.
But yeah, you're right. It's about recognizing our own power, isn't it? That we do have choices. We can control things. It's like that wonderful Eleanor Roosevelt quote, no one can make you feel inferior without your compliance, without your agreement to feeling that way.
That's perfect. That's an excellent quote.
Because we think that we are pushed around and victims of life often, don't we? Whereas actually we have a lot more power than we think we do.
And I would even go so far as to say it's easier to be a victim. I was so convinced that my ex-husband, was completely to blame for the sadness in our marriage. It was so much easier to blame than it was to say, oh, I wasn't forced into that. I wasn't forced into anything. I did that of my own free will because I didn't care about myself, because I didn't know that my life mattered. That's why. Yeah. It's time to not be a victim anymore.
And I know that you're very multi-passionate as well. There's lots of other things in your life, some of which you've shared with me, and I'd love to know, tell us a bit about the other things that you've done and still do that are important for you.
Oh, meditation has become the wonderful aspect of that spiritual life that is stuck with for so many years. Meditation is profoundly wonderful, and I love the idea of meditating and mindfulness in my day as well. So every opportunity there is to just take a breath and ground myself, that's very, very important. I do yoga as well, and I've studied
You don't just do yoga, you're a qualified yoga teacher.
I am a yoga teacher, yes. Yes, so as a touring artist, I used to use, so I also was teaching the Alexander technique, as you know, which is a postural alignment, body mindfulness, basically. You become aware of how you're using your body. And I also had started yoga as a teenager. Someone had introduced me to it. So I was always going back and forth. And as a touring musician, that kept me my body was always really good, physically very strong and keeping healthy, kept me balanced. And yes, so I became a yoga teacher because I realized that I wanted to deepen my practice, because I realized on the yoga mat one day that if everybody did yoga, there would be no war.
Yeah,
so
I think that too.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So do your yoga. Practice your yoga and inspire other people to do yoga. When you do the teacher training, it's not that necessarily to become a teacher, it's really to deepen your practice, to really get it. And this is a funny story I've never told you. What happened to me in my yoga teacher training, I was sitting during lunch with a couple of new friends who were in the training with me. They were younger and they were impressed by the fact that I'd been a singer-songwriter touring, and they wanted to know what it was like. And everybody asks that question, what's it like to do? And I began to answer that question as I always had, and it was a very pat answer. It was very much formed on what I knew they expected to hear, with a little tinge of reality check that or some sense of humor. But I was unfolding a script. And not very many sentences into this script, I choked on my words. I couldn't speak. And I looked at them both and I said, I think I'm actually lying right now. Yeah, and they were a bit taken aback, and I said, I think yoga training has gotten me so into my body that I can't actually speak these words that aren't actually true in me. And here's what I really want to tell you about being a touring singer-songwriter. And I started to tell them, and as long as I was telling them that was what was resonating from my body, it was fine.
Wow, how interesting. Mm-hmm. So what is the truthful answer then? Because
well, it changes all the time, and I think you're resonating with people. So what I'd say to you is, the truthful answer is it's a hard life. It takes you to the wall many, many times, and the state of mind that I was in, always needing my audience to approve of me because I wasn't good enough in myself, it kept me off balance all the time. So it was like being smashed to the wall and then having to bounce back. I guess that's why yoga was so important. Yeah, and it's not glamorous. You sit around in often drafty rooms that are supposed to be your warm-up space, and you share the space with the garbage and the extra cooler from the bar. A lot of late nights and having to smile. Crazy moments. This is another very funny story. It was my second record, and I was doing very well in Europe. And with my second record, I started, the fan base was expanding, and I had a little fan base starting in Norway, which is actually where my parents had emigrated from. So it was nice because I could invite family to shows and that sort of thing. So there was a nice little swell happening. And when I was in Oslo the second time or last time, I can't remember which, I was invited to a luncheon. And it was the Canadian Embassy that sponsored it or organized it. And they'd invited a lot of people. I didn't know anyone. And I came in at the time that I was told it was going to begin and sat down beside the guy from the embassy who I knew, Bet. And then there was another guy sitting here beside me, and turned out he was a journalist, and he was smiling and chatting, and his English was okay. People in Norway know how to speak English. It's wonderful. So everyone's sitting around the table, and I looked over at Beth and I said, so why are we here? And he said, well, it's lunch. You're eating. I said, okay, but is there like a special reason, or is there a special guest coming? Or he said, it's for you. And I went, oh my God, you mean? And it floored me. And now when I look back at it, I realize that was so dumb, because I should have known, but I just didn't.
You were the Norwegian Canadian.
I was the Canadian
in Oslo,
and they were all
Canadian
curious
embassy.
to meet this woman who wanted to, who was bringing her songs to Norway and was making a little bit of a splash. And this guy wanted to interview me. He was interested in Americana music, Canadian, rootsy music. And it was just, I did a second take, but I realized, ooh, okay. And I smiled, and I shifted myself. Now I know why I'm here, and I'm supposed to be that. But this is very strange moments like that, and people don't talk to you like you're just a human being anymore as well. Yeah, it's funny. Not everyone. And people have asked me to explain that, and it's hard to explain. It's just because they hear your songs and they identify with them, and they get so passionate about the music. They take it, and they have a certain sense of who you are for them. And it only happened to me in a small way, but I think it's pretty typical.
But she does, ladies and gentlemen, have 3 albums on Spotify that you can go listen to.
I do.
Go and find out all about Linda's music. It's brilliant. So just tell me a little bit more about Alexander technique. Why do you think it's so powerful?
Well, it's back to that being aware, bringing the mind into the body. And it's very simple. We get stuck in every way, but in our body, will get really stuck in using it in a certain way that it could be for so many reasons. It could be to protect ourselves from injury. It could be because we're nervous. It could be just we saw someone behave that way and we think it's cool. When people slouch, I think, I'm so relaxed now. But what they're actually doing, and I'm showing you, Rachel, is they're compressing their chest down and their chin is having to stick out and they're squeezing the back of the neck. This is actually what Alexander experienced as an orator. He watched himself in the mirror and he realized that when he was on stage, he was trying to project and he was pushing his face ever forward. So when he came up with this new way of bringing his head into balance with his shoulders, then his shoulders into balance with the rest of his body. And that shift of awareness and retraining himself allowed him to speak without any kind of struggle and freed him up. And I think the practice has changed a lot, and I think it's important in that respect as well, because it can be integrated into all the other modalities that are coming up for people now. So whatever you're interested in, whether it's Reiki or yoga or Pilates, or I'm trying to think of all these other modalities. I'm sure there's hundreds more that I don't even know about these days, all the different kinds of yoga. That element of really becoming aware of how you're using yourself is profound. So that's the long-winded answer.
Well, you've been helping me, and I'm very aware that I have bad posture, and that I've had a lot of pain in my hip, and I was putting my label of piriformis syndrome on that, and you've actually helped me, and it's literally, I don't know, it's been about 4 weeks probably, and I'm feeling much better. My body feels looser. As you said to me, I think I'm more aware of how I'm moving, and the pain that I had in my leg, that you could also call sciatica, is so much better. It's like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, well, you responded really easily as well. I think you got a high level of awareness, and whatever it was that you were doing when you were sitting and working and thinking about maybe your podcast, maybe your book, all of these wonderful things that you're doing in the world, it could have been just a little bit of emphasis on that right side of your body that was putting pressure down in there. So just letting that go as you're working on all these things that you're doing. Just letting, over time, it percolates through. Yeah. And it does, your body wants to fix itself.
Yeah.
That's, if you take anything away from this, lovely listeners, take this: your body wants to fix itself. You want to be in balance. That is your life. Your gift of being alive is that life wants to live its very best. So whether it's on a physical level, emotional, mental, whatever way.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Linda, and thank you so much. We'll have the usual links to where you can find out more about Linda McLean, but just go and search for her on Spotify and listen to her music and just be carried away, because it's amazing. So thank you very much.
Rachel, thank you so much for what you're doing as well. I have to say that your podcast has really changed my attitude about midlife. I really had thought that I'd thought it through, but listening to all the women that you've talked to has changed my ideas of community and how we, when we change ourselves and give ourselves permission to be our best self, we are really changing the world. We're unstoppable.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world. one magnificent midlife woman at a time.